Hello and welcome to all the Padawan learners out there. I'm Joe, and I've got a new video for you all. This one is hopefully going to be controversial and thus draw in viewers. So here we go. It is taken from an article I wrote over on Substack, so do go over there and subscribe over there. And also subscribe here, because why not? And here we go. The topic of, is Yoda a boomer? Basically his bad advice to Anakin about Anakin's problems regarding his fear of loss. Now, that said, the title is just a clickbait thing, honestly. I don't mind baby boomers. I find much of the drama around them strange, especially since each nation's baby boomers are different. Those of Canada are hippies. Those of France and Quebec are no-nonsense, terrifying when angered, and warm, cuddly bears when in a good mood, if somewhat haughty. Japan's are the very definition of kindness, warmth, and geniality. Where American ones are either weird lefties or basically no different from the French or Japanese ones. Don't get me started on those from England or Poland, who are rather interesting fellows who are typically a little pompous and suspicious of all. Yoda is by no means the Star Wars equivalent of a boomer, since if one was to put it in real-life terms, the Clone Wars is roughly synonymous with World War I. In that regard, Yoda would belong to the equivalent of Bismarck or Wilhelm's generation in some ways, in his ideology and thinking in comparison to his younger, more testosterone-filled counterparts, though arguably he lacks the brilliance of Bismarck or of the likes of Napoleon III or Meiji. The trouble with Yoda is that he has lived a comfortable life, one where he is pampered and need not ever venture forth into the galaxy, rather unlike odan-urr of the ancient era, or those Jedi who fought in the new Sith Wars. Though he came after that era, Yoda was handed an intact Jedi Order, and then proceeded to sign away its independence and simply sit enjoying the boons of victory, believing that he was at the end of history rather than part of it. In a lot of ways, the end of the Republic in his era is no different from that when Darth Ruin turned to the dark side and smashed the stability of the Order and the Republic to pieces, ushering in a feudalistic, warring states period, the New Sith Wars. Yoda is ill-accustomed to events happening outside his control, as he has centralized the Jedi to an obscene level and degree, so that they are truly hampered. The trouble is that this was never how the Jedi were meant to operate, as each Jedi is supposed to be able to make value judgments and decide his own path, yet they can't. What is more is that he has forbidden attachment, despite this not being very common in most Jedi orders over the centuries, as odan-urr allowed it, though you needed permission from your master and sometimes also the council. The next order allowed it, as did those during the New Sith Wars. The trouble for Yoda was that he derived the wrong lesson from previous eras, believing that the Darksiders fall because they have attachments, even though every case of attachment led to the Darksider turning away from the dark side, Well, okay. Out of about 6 examples, Bastila, Revan, Atris, Naama Bindo, Aaron K/Treya/Kreia, Ulic Queldroma, 4 turned back to the light. Bastila, Revan, Kreia, Ulic, or something vaguely resembling light, as in the case of Kreia and Ulic. What is more is that within his own order, he had Jedi breaking the oath of no attachment, willy-nilly. Most notably, Qui-Gon Jinn, who broke it with Tal more than once during his adolescence, and then as a full-grown man several times. Yet Yoda overlooked this. In regards to Obi-Wan, he did not, so that Obi-Wan got the crook. So, Yoda's not against all attachments, just some? He also knew about Padme, yet tolerated it. Everybody knew, save maybe Barriss Offee. The reason being that Anakin was crap at hiding it, and it is thus this situation into which Anakin trod his way into. He did not fully realize it, but he was stepping into a landmine-infested zone. Other Jedi were not allowed marriage and kids under Yoda's supervision, and he was because chosen one and all. Heck, in some comics there's something possibly going on between Skywalker and his former classmate Barriss. So he got more than a little bit of blind eye / carte blanche to do as he pleased. There is also the fact that Anakin's obsession with pleasing Obi-Wan and having Obi-Wan around and alive at all times could be construed as dangerous also. To those unaware, Anakin's dream when he turned was to kill Palpatine for lying to him, usurping him as Emperor, and having Padme and Obi-Wan at his side. This is why he was pretty unhinged on Mustafar, as neither of them reacted the way he had hoped. But back to Yoda. He knows about Padme, knows about Anakin's terror of losing Obi-Wan, the way he did Shmi. Trust me on that one. Skywalker is someone who lost Shmi, and where Obi-Wan sought to comfort Anakin, reaching out as a father might to his son, and with the two also still grieving the loss of Obi-Wan's lover, Silly Tachi, Yoda gives non-advice. Anakin has, in the space of 3 years, lost 2 mothers, countless friends, nearly lost his father figure, and feels out of place in the Order. He's going through a lot, and came crying, sort of, to Yoda for the first time in his life. And all Yoda has to say is, train yourself to let go of that which you fear to lose. This comes down to telling him to stop caring and just work harder. Yes, at times the latter 2 pieces of advice can work in certain situations. There's nuance to be had there. But Yoda's advice here is inexcusable. Anakin is a terrified child in some ways, needing genuine advice. He needs philosophy, he needs strength, and he needs compassion. What is more is that he's earned it. Anakin did not wish to turn to Palpatine, nor did he thematically wish to turn to the dark side. In the novel, it is clear that he is open to things like Stoic philosophy and other such ideas. He is. He's even kind of expecting it, as the notion of do not live as though you will live 1,000 years is something that might have helped him. So Yoda should have given him a copy of the Meditations. Yet what Yoda tells him is to just not care. This is easy for Yoda, who has been attachment-free for 900 years, and is later quoted in the EU as blaming the whole of the fall of the Order on Mace and Dooku along with Anakin. But truth is, Mace Windu was Yoda's son / former Padawan, and was seeking to protect those he loved. Dooku was a Darksider, true, but Yoda raised him badly, and Anakin wished for pity and sympathy, not a lesson in becoming heartless. Now, what is so interesting about the advice is that it is a lesson that Dooku taught himself at 13 years old, to stop caring for others. It is a lesson that horrified Qui-Gon when Dooku tried to pass it to him, with Jin pulling back and severing the bond between him and Dooku. The two of them already hated each other by the time he passed the trials. So what Yoda is advising is that Anakin become like Dooku. Well, we all know what that looked like. I mean, Dooku attempted murder at 13 years old. In all, the advice, stop caring, is something that Qui-Gon rejected, Obi-Wan rejected, and Anakin rejected. The trouble is that this was Anakin's greatest moment of weakness. I'll be the first to say that Anakin should never have gone to Yoda for advice. His thinking was that all other Jedi go to Yoda for advice, so why not him too? The trouble is that his particular problem was not something Yoda could understand. Actually, Yoda had contempt for it. Not caring for others is the problem, as Yoda had come to exist and not live. So where Odan-Urr loved all the children in his order, loved his fellow Jedi, and was in constant grief as he hated to lose a single Jedi, Yoda was the opposite. Oh, a certain place in the Room of 1,000 Fountains reminds him of Tal? Just move to the meditation chambers until he's numb to the loss, then go back to his favorite rock. This is a reference to a Jude Watson novel. This isn't actually dealing with loss. This is simply washing it away like a small cut. Grief is like an open wound. It bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. But the ability to care and to feel that loss can lead to strength. It is by the overcoming and the accepting of the loss that we grow, not by suppressing it. It is also interesting that Yoda happily beheads his clone commanders, while the other Jedi could not bring themselves to do so. Obi-Wan refuses to kill Cody when he has the chance, and there are other Jedi who prefer to flee from their commanders than to fight them. Why? They were in the front lines together and can't quite bring themselves to kill their comrades. Anakin struggles with grief. Can you blame him after how he lost his mother so brutally? He's afraid. He needs and deserves reassurance, not indifference. A case can be made that At least Palpatine pretended to care. Sure, Anakin knew on some level he didn't, but pretending is better than nothing. What should Anakin have done? Well, gone to Windu, Plo Koon, or Obi-Wan. What might they have done? Hard to say. Windu would have had Anakin dispatched back to the war, and had Padme moved secretly elsewhere, and then put Anakin on trial after the war was concluded for breaking the Jedi oaths. Koon would have given him paternal advice. He was Qui-Gon's best friend, after all, and would have likely tried to steer Skywalker towards Kenobi. Obi-Wan, he would have probably moved Padme to Alderaan and proposed Anakin accompany him, or recommended him for another mid-rim mission, or likely suggested that Padme needed a bodyguard, or slip away with her for a certain period of time. This after he had talked to Amidala, who tended to not like him most of the time, but was desperate enough to listen now. With Obi-Wan doing what he always did, kept the secret relationship of his peers to himself. The truth is, they would have helped. Yoda didn't. He had no interest. He liked the present status quo, and could not understand why Anakin would rock the boat now. Truth was that someone's life was on the line, and though visions ought not to have been trusted, given the tendency in Star Wars of bring about the vision if one tries to resist it, there were ways around it. What is more is that he himself thought that Palps had too much influence over Skywalker, yet he didn't try to change the situation. Tolkien once wrote that advice is dangerous, true, but he also wrote that if you can help another, you should. And so it was that Yoda was duty-bound to help Anakin. True, we all speak of filial piety from child to parent, but there is an equal duty, that of a parent to their child. So should Anakin have stopped caring about Padme? This might sound weird, but absolutely not. She would have miscarried had that happened. As an individual, she was weak-willed. Ophi, her rival, was stronger. Her bodyguard, Sabe, was stronger. Padme did not have much strength of will, but she was deep down a good person. She was also carrying twins, and aborting a child would not be right, nor was it an option. Likely, had Windu, Koon, or Kenobi known about Yoda's bad advice, they would have disagreed. Had Celie been around, Anakin would have likely consulted with her, and she would have gone to Obi-Wan, and she would have pressed Anakin's suit and would have resolved the problem. But Yoda was not Windu, Koon, Kenobi, or Tachi. Instead, he handed the chosen one to the dark side on a silver platter. Now, while I'm an avowed fan of Yoda, I think he's a complex character, and didn't want to write an article disapproving of his decisions for quite some time. The trouble is that I've noticed elsewhere people either blaming Windu for what Anakin did, nonsense, Obi-Wan, stupid of them, Anakin, not at fault, or commenting on the wrongness of Yoda's decision to give non-advice. But few cared to elaborate on why they disagreed with Yoda, whereas I wanted to. My view is that it was philosophical sloth. It was intellectual and spiritual laziness that led Yoda to turn Anakin away. The reason Yoda did not help is that he could not. Sadly, Yoda was broken. He had spent centuries hardening himself against others, making it so that he did not care about them, and had turned away from the universe in a lot of ways. He had transformed himself into Madame Tremaine from Ever After, or Denethor from Lord of the Rings. He had cut himself off from the outside world, and had put up too many walls between others and him. Look how Mace is horrified by the thought of the Order falling and Palpatine scheming against it and the Republic, and Yoda's dislike for making a move. Look at Yoda's claims to like Obi-Wan, but how he outright destroys him in Secrets of the Jedi, the first part, and refuses to help Obi-Wan with his sense of survivor's guilt from the Brock Chun incident in Jedi Apprentice. Strangely, Mace tried to help, as did Qui-Gon. It might sound harsh, but Yoda did not care. He would not allow himself to. Heck, look how quickly he says, "Well, that sucks that your son is now a child murderer. Obi, time to go kill him." Hardly allowing Obi-Wan even seconds to grieve. Yes, he himself is traumatized by what has happened, but he doesn't spare even a minute to help alleviate Obi-Wan's pain and grief, despite his obligations towards Kenobi. His reaction to Luke leaving to help Han and Leia is shrug. "Oh well, guess we'll have to hope for Leia and train her now." That said, does Yoda get an arc? Yes, he is clearly changed by the time Anakin appears alongside him and Obi-Wan in Return of the Jedi at the end of the saga. But before that, the reason he could not help Anakin was that he did not know how. He honestly has no understanding of love, viewing it from an intellectual standpoint and not a personal one. Weirdly, the most tragic thing here is that Yoda has lived 900 years without ever connecting with anyone, without ever loving someone like a son or a grandson, or properly stepping out of the temple, as all other Jedi had to go mingle with the commoners. Instead, he wrapped himself up in armor and hid from the galaxy. Ultimately, he is no less a terrified and distant figure than Owen Lars in New Hope, and no less trapped in a kind of torturous suit of armor than Darth Vader is. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, and also go check out my Substack, as it's the best one on Substack. Trust me, especially if you like fantasy, chivalry, and of course Star Wars, and even Power Rangers. So, do take care, my friends, and may the Force be with you all.